Imagine waking up after surgery and your own sister tells you that your baby didn't make it. You drown in grief for months, losing your mind, while she becomes Hero Doctor of the Year. Now imagine finding a document that proves she didn't lose your baby, she sold them for $500,000. Most people would call the police, but I did something much worse. This is how I took down a criminal empire from the inside. I need you to understand who Serafina was before I get into what she did, because none of this makes sense without context. She was always the brilliant one, 8 years older than me, valedictorian, full scholarship to Duke, then Johns Hopkins Medical School. Our parents talked about her the way people talk about a miracle. Serafina's presenting at a conference. Serafina got the attending position. Serafina is being written up in Charleston magazine. She was the crown jewel of our family, and for a long time, I was genuinely proud of her. I'm not even saying that sarcastically. I adored my big sister. She was my OB-GYN because that felt like the safest possible choice. Who's going to take better care of you than blood? My pregnancy was classified as high risk from the start because of a clotting disorder I'd been managing for years. I was scared. My husband Derek was terrified. Serafina held my hand in that office and said, "I have delivered over 2,000 babies. You are in the best hands in this city. Trust me." And God help me, I did. The delivery was on a Thursday in March. I remember the morning light coming through the hospital window and thinking the day felt hopeful somehow. I was 37 weeks. We had a name picked out, Nora Grace. I had her going home outfit folded in the hospital bag, a little white onesie with yellow ducks. Things moved fast once they started. Too fast, looking back. Serafina came in around 11 a.m. and said my blood pressure was dangerously elevated and that we needed to act immediately or risk a hemorrhagic event. She recommended general anesthesia rather than an epidural, which she said was too risky given my clotting situation. Her voice was calm, clinical. Later, I would realize she'd rehearsed that part. I woke up in recovery to Derek standing over me with red eyes and my parents clutching each other in the corner. Serafina was there too, in her scrubs, her face arranged into something that looked like grief but wasn't. She took my hand before I could even orient myself and said, "Sweetheart, I am so sorry. We lost her. There was nothing anyone could have done." I want to describe that moment accurately, and I'm not sure I can. It was like someone had physically reached into my chest. I remember making a sound I'd never made before, something animal. Derek broke down. My mom started praying out loud, and Serafina stood there with her hand on mine and said, "She was perfect. She just wasn't meant to stay." I spent the next 3 months barely functional. I'm talking about not getting off the couch for days. Derek took leave from work. I saw a grief counselor twice a week. The physical recovery from the delivery was hard enough, but the emotional weight of it was something I genuinely didn't think I would survive. Every time I saw a stroller at Publix, I had to leave the store. I couldn't look at the onesie for weeks. Serafina checked on me exactly 4 times. Then she got busy. New hospital initiative, speaking engagement at a conference in Miami, always something. I told myself doctors compartmentalize because they have to. I made excuses for her the way I'd always made excuses for her. Then it was December, and Serafina asked if I could help her prep some documents for her accountant. She had this luxury spa concept she'd been developing in downtown Charleston, a $2 million build-out, fancy investors, the whole thing, had been struggling for months. She needed someone she trusted to organize her business records. She picked me because I have a background in financial compliance, and because she trusted me not to ask too many questions. She should have done it herself. I was at her kitchen island with her laptop and a stack of physical ledgers, and there it was. Line item, April. Anonymous LLC payment to Serafina R. Thorne, M.D., $500,000. Description, consulting, no invoice attached, no project name, no client. I am trained to notice when numbers don't make sense, and this number screamed. Serafina was upstairs on a work call. I sat there for 30 seconds staring at that line. And then something I can't fully explain happened. It wasn't a rational thought process. It was more like my body understanding something before my brain did. My hands started shaking. I photographed every page of the ledger. Then I went to the bathroom, splashed water on my face, and came back out and finished the job like nothing happened. I did not sleep that night. I hired a private investigator named Gus, who came highly recommended by a lawyer friend of mine. I told him about the payment and said I wanted to know where it came from. I specifically did not tell him my suspicions yet because I thought I was being paranoid. I thought maybe Serafina had done some legitimate consulting work she hadn't mentioned. I wanted evidence before I let myself go where my gut was pulling me. Gus came back to me in 6 weeks with a file that I had to sit down to read. The $500,000 had originated from a shell company registered in Delaware that traced back to a tech executive and his wife living in a gated community in Redmond, Washington. Gus had done surveillance. They had a little girl. She looked to be about 8 or 9 months old in the photos. Dark hair, a face I recognized in a way that bypassed logic entirely and went straight to something primal. I called a family law attorney that same afternoon. Then I called a criminal attorney. Then I contacted a DNA testing service that handles legal-grade samples. Through Gus and methods I won't fully describe here, we obtained a DNA sample from the child in Washington. She was mine. The test came back at 99.998% probability of maternity. My daughter was alive. She had been alive this entire time, while I was lying on a grief counselor's couch talking about acceptance and healing. What I felt in that moment was not relief. Relief came later. What I felt first was a rage so total and so cold that it scared me. I called Derek into the room, closed the door, and told him everything. He sat completely still for about 90 seconds. Then he got up and walked outside and didn't come back in for 20 minutes. When he came back, he said, "Tell me what you need me to do." Here's what I needed him to do. Nothing. Not yet. Because I was not going to move until every single piece was in place. Over the next 2 months, my legal team filed a civil RICO claim against Serafina and the hospital, alleging a pattern of racketeering that included the falsified death certificate, the fraudulent adoption facilitation, and evidence Gus had uncovered suggesting this wasn't the first time the hospital's paperwork had been manipulated. My attorneys filed a $20 million civil suit for intentional infliction of emotional distress, medical fraud, and the unlawful termination of my parental rights. We prepared a separate filing for the South Carolina State Medical Board with the falsified delivery records attached, and I called a reporter at the Associated Press who covered healthcare fraud. The timing was Serafina's department promotion ceremony at the hospital. They were naming her head of obstetrics. There was a little event planned. Colleagues, department heads, probably a catered spread and a plaque with her name on it. The AP story published at 8 a.m. that morning. I'm told she walked into the hospital atrium in her good clothes and saw people on their phones. Her assistant met her at the elevator and couldn't speak. The state medical board had already issued an emergency suspension of her license. By 9 a.m., federal agents were in the building. They arrested her in the hallway outside the department that was about to be hers. She was still wearing her lanyard. Someone filmed it on their phone, and it was on Twitter within the hour. The criminal charges include human trafficking, medical fraud, falsifying government documents, and conspiracy. The RICO case added federal racketeering. The family in Washington cooperated fully once they understood what had actually happened. They had been told Nora was an orphan. They were devastated, and they handed her over to the court's care immediately. I drove through the night to be there. Serafina's $4 million historic home on the Battery was seized as part of the asset forfeiture proceedings. The spa business collapsed the same week. Every business partner she had publicly cut ties. Her face was on CNN. Her colleagues, people who had admired her for 20 years, gave statements to federal investigators. The hospital settled the civil suit for $14.2 million to avoid a public trial. She is currently awaiting sentencing. The federal prosecutor is seeking 30 years. Her attorneys negotiated nothing. There is no deal on the table because the evidence is so complete that there's nothing to negotiate with. Nora came home to us on a Wednesday in November. She was 9 months old. She looked at me for a long time when I held her, like she was deciding something, and then she grabbed my finger. I kept the yellow duck onesie. It didn't fit anymore. I bought a new one, and I put her in it anyway and held her in the rocking chair we'd had in storage, and I cried for about 2 hours straight. She's almost 14 months now. She just started walking. She has Derek's stubborn determination and, apparently, my inability to nap anywhere but her own bed. People ask me if I regret not confronting Serafina the night I found the ledger, if I wish I'd screamed at her, demanded answers right there at her kitchen island. No, not even a little. Screaming would have felt good for 30 seconds. What I did instead took everything from her, and that's the only currency that was ever going to be worth a thing.